Hello, Mike. You're in quickly. I think we're all up and running. Just checking that everything is going fine with the tech. Yeah, looks like we're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube, which is all very nice. Lovely. So, welcome back, everybody. Or welcome if you weren't here yesterday. Yesterday I did a live stream on this. Let me change this camera a little bit, move it around. There we go. On this subject, just to quickly recap, I'm doing a little series this week of live streams. And basically, I've been trying to get back to regular live streams for a while, and I think that I've found a way that I can probably do it. So I've been doing roughly one a week, and I'm going to start upping it now to do a few more, but probably shorter ones rather than like 2-hour streams or something like that. And this week, the subject is seeing more as a painter sees, which means seeing shapes of light and shadow instead of things. For example, this shape here is a light shape, a shadow shape, sorry. And it's 2 roses in shadow. But instead of outlining both roses, I've just outlined the shadow shape. So yesterday did the drawing out, and today I'm going to mix some colours and start putting, basically I want to see if I can get this panel covered. Now, it's not that small a panel, it's a 12 by 16 by 12 I should say, because I think you're supposed to say the height first, right? So it's a 16 by 12 inch panel. But you know, I've got some fairly big brushes, so we might be all right. So I'm not going to paint any detail today. I'm not going to divide any of these shapes up, probably not at this stage anyway. Depends how excited I get as I start painting. All I want to do is to fill in these big shapes. Really, really simply, because my goal in this little series is to show you, if you start really simply, and you paint shapes of light and shadow and not things, chances are you'll end up with a better result. So hello and welcome everybody. Michelle, hello. You're new from Massachusetts. Have I said that right? I'm not sure if I've said that right. Hello, Vivid. Nice to see you, everybody. Hello, everybody who's just joined. If you're on Facebook, Ginia, there you are. Hello. I was just about to say, if you're on Facebook, leave me a message so I know you're there. Okay. Hi, Rebecca. Hello, Margie. Yeah, everything's coming through from Facebook now. Looks like we're all good. So I've already had a good look at this photo. I've had a good look at the subject, which I took the photo of, the roses. They're unfortunately a little bit past their best now, as you can see. But still quite useful for colour, to get colour notes from. But I want to start with the background, okay? Well, before I go any further, I want to tell you, now, as you probably know, most of you know that I use Munsell, right? So here's a couple of Munsell chips from the big Munsell book, which are going to give me like pretty close to the light and the shadow side that I want for the background, because the background is lighter on the right-hand side. Before I go any further, though, I want to give you a link to this amazing tool made by Michelle Clamp. Now, this is a totally amazing thing. If you haven't seen it already, it allows you to upload a photo. And even if you don't have a Munsell book, it's useful, I think. It will show you the Munsell numbers, and it gives you a little swatch of the color. You can click on different areas of the photo and it gives you a little swatch. I think it's total genius. So I'm not going to go into detail on how I arrive at these colors, because they're partly derived from the photo, partly derived from experience of a lot of mixing and a lot of painting. But I know that over here, I want something pretty dark. I want to be down the bottom of the value scale. Now, if you don't have one of these are incredibly useful. This is a Munsell value scale. Now, the Munsell value scale is good because it's perceptually even. There are lots of value scales, and they're, you know, I'm sure they're all great. I use this one, the Munsell value scale, because I'm a Munsell dude and because it's perceptually even. The steps are perceptually even, and you can put dabs of paint on it to check the value because it's like a laminated plastic thing. You can find these by looking on eBay. If you just look for Munsell value scale, Paul Cantore, C-E-N-T-O-R-E, it's only $10. I don't get anything for this if you buy this, by the way. Paul is a good guy, and he will often send you a little handwritten note if you buy one of his value scales. So I know I want to be right down the bottom of the value scale for the left-hand side. I've already put out some paints here that I think are going to get me fairly close. The main thing that I need to be sure of is that I mix up some nice big wadges of paint. So this is going to be the left-hand side where it's really, really dark in shadow. But I like to do the background first with these things because it allows me to kind of get things established really well at the beginning. Okay. So I'm going to put this at the moment, that's raw umber, and I put in a little bit of transparent red oxide to send it a bit more orange, because raw umber is kind of a yellow orange. I'll put in a little bit of black, drop the value a little bit, make it a little bit more opaque. I'm going to get a biggish brush. So this is like about, how big is that? About 1/2 inch. The ferrule is about 1/2 inch hog. And I'm literally just going to start putting in some values on the left-hand side. Looks really dark, right? Because the panel is white. But if you already have your colors kind of figured out and you know what you're going to be putting where, as I pretty much have it, this is a whole other subject that's kind of beyond the scope of these streams this week. I really want to stay focused on, as much as I can, on, you know, this kind of conceptual approach to shape. So on the right hand side, I've got another color. I want it like this. Now this, in value terms, this is like a value. What is this? I think it's a 5, 4, value 4. So I'm going to mix this. I'm going to mix plenty of it because I've got quite a lot to fill. If anybody is, if there are any monthly type people, these are, I think they're 5YR, both of them. Which basically, if you don't do Munsell, I know that sounds really weird, but the YR just means yellow, red, orange to the rest of us. And a brown is basically low chroma, low value orange. That's all it is. Let's get a bit more paint in here. Bring this value down. So I'm trying to make sure that I bring this down. Value 4 is like, if you think of a value scale in Munsell terms, value 4 is, value 1 is like the bottom of the scale, a value 9 is like the top of the scale, white. And value 4 is just below the middle. So like value 5 is pretty much in the middle of the value scale. I'm looking at this color and it's got way too much chroma at the moment, which means it's too intense. Too colorful, you could say. So I'm going to drop the chroma. Chroma is a whole other thing. It's, I think, one of the most important aspects of color to be able to nail. After value, I think chroma is the next most important. Let's see if we've got any questions yet. Here I am mixing away. What happened to the one you started yesterday? Says Nancy. It's here. This is the one I started yesterday. I'm just doing more on it today. Diane, happy birthday. I didn't know it was Diane's birthday. Hi, Sean. Good to see you. Carol's here. Hello, Carol. And Sean. Kelly. Good afternoon, evening to you too, Sean. No questions yet. If you've got any questions about anything I'm doing as we go along, just pop them in the chat and I'll do my best to keep up. I do sometimes get a little bit involved in what I'm doing and forget to keep up with the chat. Quite often, actually, if I'm honest. Still too much chrome, I need to drop it more. I'm using big wadges of colour here because one of the annoying things about, this has probably happened to all of you, is you mix up some colour and you go to cover the panel and then you find that you don't have enough and you have to mix some more and it's a pain and all the rest of it. So I'm using, to drop the chroma of this, I'm using a near neutral, so mostly black and lead white. I'll tell you, I'll just get this dropped, the chroma dropped a bit further, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what I've got on the palette here today. I know a lot of people save paint. I tend not to do that, actually. I tend to, that should do. We should be a little bit more red. That would be all right, but we'll send it a little bit more red. That's all right, Linda. You're very welcome. I like doing this stuff. So I'm going to raise the value of that before I put it into the paint, so it goes in at about the same value. Now, me personally, I spend a lot of time on the palette first. When I'm painting, especially at the beginning, I actually spend more time on the palette than I do anywhere else, than I do on the painting itself. Because, I suppose you could say I'm a tiny bit obsessive about colour. Tiny bit. And I really like to make sure that they are the colours that I've decided that they should be when I go into painting. So that's like the light side of the background. This is the dark side of the background. I'm going to need a different brush to put the light side on. This brush here, look at this brush. This is a Cornelissen Hog, right? I've had this brush somewhere between 10 and 15 years. It's been used on, God knows, hundreds of paintings by now, and it's still in fantastic shape. Cornelissen Hogs. Honestly, if you ask me, you can't beat them. So I do need to chop off the background here on this side at least, and that's going to come... What I mean is I need a division between the cloth and the background, because it's going to be, I think it's going to be about here, because they're different colour. The value is not that different back there if you squint down, but they are going to be different colour, and everything is going to look really, really dark at the beginning. So I've gone into the vase there, right? Because I'm painting shape and not things. You would be tempted ordinarily to go around the vase there. See here, there's the vase you can see here, but I'm going to paint across into the vase because it's glass, right? So what I want there is what I can see through the vase. But this shape I'm leaving because that's a different color, that's a different value. Here are the leaves. Try and be a little bit careful about some of the drawing that I wasn't so careful about yesterday. And because this color is going onto a white panel, it can be, especially with darker colors, it can be quite difficult to cover at first. Now this rose, I was looking at this rose earlier on today, actually, over on the right-hand side. Sorry, this collection of light and shadow shapes. And I noticed that the drawing wasn't that great, so I'm going to change it a little bit as I go. But everything is still pretty simplified. This kind of approach works better. I want to do this fairly quickly, you know. It works better if you spend a lot of time like doing a really careful outline. Now I need to start moving towards the shadow, so I'm going to mix a little bit between the two and let this colour darken now. Because actually the background is a lot darker than you'd think. And I've got to try and use my brush here without actually tucking my mic, bashing the mic, because it's quite close to the panel today. See, these are the difficulties of a live streaming painter that no one sees. Not a flower, a light shape and a shadow shape, two shapes there. I'm going to go around those. I will probably, like, later on, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, I'll probably go over the background again. So for the moment, I really just want to fill it in, so I can see the relationship, so I can see how everything is going to work against it. So as I move over to the left, I'm gradually adding more of the dark background colour. So the value is gradually dropping. Can you see that? So what I'm going to end up with on the palette here is almost like you could call it a string. From the light to the shadow. And that's a theme that I'm going to be returning to, like, throughout this little mini series. I think I'm probably going to do 4. This is number 2, right? I don't know if I'll take this painting to a complete finish, because that would almost defeat the object in some ways, because what I want to show you is the beginning, but I want to take it far enough along that you can see, hopefully, that by starting with a good beginning, I can get at least to a good middle stage. And what I really want to show you, what I'm hoping is going to work out with this, is how little detail you need to paint in order to create a convincing feeling of light and shadow. So I'm getting almost over to the shadow value now, really low value over this side. And I'm refining the shapes a little bit as we go, adding a little bit more detail as I go around. Questions? Let's have a look at the chat and see. Hi, Michelle. I just dropped a link to your amazing tool. By the way, I should tell you, I ran this photo that you can see on the stream through your tool earlier on today, and it totally nailed the chips. There was a couple of hues that I would choose differently, but I suspect that your tool was more accurate. For anyone who's just joined and didn't see that, Michelle has built an amazing, absolutely amazing tool that you can upload a photo to, and it will show you a little color swatch, and it will also tell you the Munsell value. I mean, just knowing the values is like amazingly useful. You know, the Munsell value, the hue, and the chroma. And I have to tell you, I've been doing this for about 15 years, maybe now, painting with Munsell. And it's extremely accurate, to the point where I actually think it may be more accurate than my own estimates, even though I've been doing it so long. I mean, this thing is, it's big news, this, as far as I'm concerned, this tool. And I would strongly suggest checking it out, even if you don't use Munsell. I really think this is, you're going to be hearing a lot more about this tool over the next few years. I think it's, well, as I say, I just think it's a bigger deal than anybody realizes at the moment. Even you, possibly, Michelle. It's major, and it really works. Have we got enough background in? Do you think we got enough in? Or should I fill it all in? It's just like this stage is such a bind. It's like everything takes so long. Let's go slightly lightening as we go over this way. So hopefully you'll notice, like here, this is the side of the vase. I am going to ignore it, paint straight over it to the next shape. So even though I've got a vase to paint, I'm already ignoring it, that it's there. I'm only interested in the shapes. And you see, like, there would be there's a line there that I haven't painted in, which would be the division between the cloth in shadow and the background. Squint down and you can hardly see that. You can hardly see it. So guess what? I'm going to ignore it completely because I'm interested in light and shadow shapes, not things, right? So I'm going to paint straight over it. Let's bring the value right down here in the bottom corner. This is mostly, by now I'm mostly like raw umber and ivory black, because even though I mixed so much of that shadow colour, I'm actually running out now. I think that'll probably do us for now. We've got enough in, what do you reckon? So I'm going to smooth this out a little bit. What shall I use? This is a really soft watercolour wash brush. Sorry, I know there's a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to try and get to. So I'm doing this just to knock back some of the brush strokes. And I'm also doing it because I want to be thinking about the edges at this stage, even though, you know, I've hardly done anything yet, but I don't want any hard edges. I would rather start from a position where everything is soft and then selectively harden some edges, than start with a bunch of hard edges and then decide which to soften, because you'll almost always err on hard. And I think you create much better paintings if you err on the side of soft and then selectively harden a few. Let me try and catch up with the chat. Happy birthday to you, Diane. Sharon says, hi Michelle, I just checked out your Chroma Magic this morning. It looks awesome. I can tell you it is awesome. I've been playing with it quite a bit and it's extremely good. Anne says, what type of canvas are you painting on? This is an ampersand gesso board panel. It's basically just a hardboard panel that's got some kind of acrylic primer on it. Hello, Dina. Good to see you. Is it Dina or Dinah? Hopefully I haven't mispronounced your name. David says, I'm going to Cornelison's on Thursday. I'm outrageously jealous. And so is Margie. It's in Aladdin's Cave, that place. I always spend way more money than I should when I go there. Joy says, have you posted a copy of your reference photo for this? I haven't actually. Maybe I should do it. Maybe I should. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Let me try and think. I'll try and remember. Sean says, would you consider this a combination no-tan colour value stage? Yeah, that would actually be a pretty good way to think about it, Sean, yes. I'm handling everything at the same time, drawing, composition, value and colour. But it's all very simplified like a no-tan is. So yeah, that's probably a good way to think about it. Yeah. Stephen says, do you thin paints at this stage? They seem so fluid. No, I don't. But what I've done is I've put down a layer of oil cut with a small amount of solvent on the panel already. So it really helps them spread out quickly. You're welcome, Kathy. So yeah, they call it a couch or a couche, if you want to be posh and French and everything. I need to put some more some more colours in. Let's put the cloth in. Now I'm in two minds about the cloth here, about which colours I'm going to use. There's some light drop off, so it's lighter over this side than it is over this side. I'm not going to paint any detail. All I want is the overall value, chroma and hue. The right colour in the right place. That's all I'm after for now. So I'm hoping that once, at the end of this session, once this is all in, I guess it's probably going to be about an hour or so. Maybe less, maybe more. You should be able to squint right down and get an impression, a visual impression of light and shadow. Maybe take those off. Now the reason I'm not sure about this is I haven't quite decided on the chroma, whether to go higher chroma or lower chroma. I'm leaning towards lower chroma, but I may need to add some. So these chips here, they're all the same hue. These two are the same value and these two are the same value. So this is the colour for over this side. This is the colour for over this side. But I've got two lower and two higher chroma because I couldn't quite decide which. Probably that means that it's somewhere in between the two, but let's mix the lower chroma one and see what happens. Because yes, it is more difficult to add chroma to a colour than it is to take it out, but I'm very aware that it's also extremely easy to get chroma too high, and I don't want to do that. So let's mix, we'll forget about those, the high chroma ones, and we'll use the low chroma one. The value I'm pretty sure about though. So we've got a big area to cover, pretty big. I'm going to start off, I don't know how this mix is going to go. I'm going to start off with transparent red oxide, which I know is going to be too red-orange. So I'm going to add some yellow ochre, which is a little bit more of a yellow-orange. Start to bring the value up a bit. The chroma is way too high, obviously, so I'm going to bring it up the rest of the way with white, and then we'll see where we are. Still going to be too high chroma, I think. Way too high. So now I'm hitting about the value range that I want. You can see, hopefully, now, anyone who isn't sure what chroma is, I was talking about the intensity of the colour. Hopefully that shows you about intense colour. So to drop the chroma, I'm going to mix a colour of the same value, a similar hue, but much lower chroma. So this is transparent red oxide and white, which I can get to the same value. There's inevitably I was thinking about pre-mixing all of the colours and just painting the thing, but I wanted you to see you mix. I wanted you to see me mix as well, because I know it's one of those things that people struggle with a lot. So if I can introduce anyone to this approach of mixing, then I would be quite happy. Stephen says you paint into the wet couch. Yes, I do. That's exactly how I do it. It allows a lot of expression of the brush. It allows you to paint more loosely. It allows you to cover more quickly. It's just a brilliant idea from pretty much every perspective. So now I've got a low chroma and a high chroma one. Let's grab some of that low chroma one and mix in some of the high chroma one and see where we are. So I'm after this colour here. We're all right, but it's a bit too yellow, actually. Surprisingly, I thought it was going to be too red. But it's too yellow. The value is good and the chroma is good, so I want to send it a bit more red. Bring some red in, but I'm not just going to whack it in. I'm going to bring it up to roughly the right value and then whack it in. Actually, it's probably gone more yellow because raw umber is a yellowish orange. Now that has sent it more red, which is great, but it's brought the chroma up a bit, so it's actually really close to the high. It's somewhere in between the two. Actually, because it's somewhere in between the two in chroma. You know what? I think I'll stick with it. I think I'll stick with it, because I think the colour is probably somewhere in between the two in chroma. So let's get a darker version together. Apologies if I've missed any questions. I'm just going to mix this next colour for the other side. You will see me, as I was saying before, spend a lot of time on the palette, especially at the beginning. Like almost all of it, and then throw the colour onto the panel. And I'd even go so far as to say that most people, when they're learning, I mean, I say when they're learning, we're all always learning, but you know what I mean. When you're towards the beginning of your learning journey, let's say, I would say most people spend too much time on the painting and not enough time on the palette. Most of the magic happens on the palette. So we're nearly there. The value is good. We want to go a bit more red. Obviously, I'm doing this pretty quickly, the mixing side. In workshops, I spend a lot of time over this, so sometimes I put out extra videos just to show how the colours are mixed. But for workshops, I also specify using, like you would need a Munsell book, you know, that should be good. And the great thing about that is it means that we can be sure that we're using the same colours no matter how weird your screen is. I'm pretty sure that I broadcast with a good colour balance, pretty sure. But you never know what's on the other end on the receiving equipment. Before I put the colour on, let me have a quick look at the chat, see if I've missed anything. Why lead white and not another white like titanium? Good question. Because of the properties of the paint. So the main reason I like lead white is because it dries way quicker than titanium. Titanium dries really slowly. And if you work on paintings in multiple sessions, like which I mostly do these days, I used to do a lot of Alla Prima, but these days I'm finding I'm working on things over multiple sessions. I want it to dry, you know, pretty quickly so I can get on and paint some more. I need it to dry. I also prefer the handling qualities of lead, but you can paint with titanium fine. I had a phase where I just painted with titanium and nothing else. I mean, I don't mean I only painted with white. I mean, that was the only white I used. That's what I mean. But you knew that, right? Anyway, let's stick some of this up. Nice big fat brush, another Cornelissen hug. Actually, someone who is watching today bought me this brush. And it has seen much use, David. So, look, if I just get this and I put this down, we've got all of this glass to paint, right? I'm not going to paint any of the glass, but you knew this, right? I'm just going to go straight over it. I'm painting shapes. I'm not even painting glass. So this is going up to the edge of the shadow. This looks dark, right? If I fill in this bit so you can see it just against the cast shadow, you can see the relationship a bit more there. Looks dark. Maybe I've gone too dark. I might want to bring the value up a little bit. We'll see. So that's over that side. And then over this side, there's quite a lot of light drop off, so it gets darker over here. At the moment, looking at this, I do think it looks dark, but it's very hard to tell at this point because you're seeing it against, oh blimey, you're seeing it against quite a lot of white patches, which obviously are going to be disappearing. So, you know, we see value as in relationships to other values, which is part of the reason you want to be you know, looking at starting paintings like this. So otherwise it's very, very difficult to see differences in value. At the back, it gets darker behind the cast shadow here. So this part is this part of the vase here is really the background color. So I'm not going to paint the cloth color over that. I think that's definitely too dark. Let's bring the value up a little bit. I don't want to completely lose the chroma, but I definitely want to bring the value up because now I can see it. Against the shadow color. Squinting down, I'd say I've definitely gone too dark with that. So I'm gonna change it now rather than later. So I'm mixing a bit lighter than I want it to go to because anything that I put on now is going to mix with what I've already got there. So this is a case in point and another good reason for starting painting with broad light and shadow shapes. If you spent a load of time on the pattern of that cloth, on the folds and all of that stuff, and then realized like well into the painting that the value was wrong and you needed to bring it up, that's a tough shout. When you've already done a lot of detail, it's pretty difficult. But if you're painting like in very simplified terms and just shape like this right at the beginning, you can just change it. You know, you're extremely, you're agile at this point. It's easy to change things. Later on, it's very hard if there's detail in there. So I'm squinting down and I'm trying to get this to about the right value that I want on the left-hand side. Against the value of the background, that's what I'm judging it against. I'm putting white in, but I'm having to add colour back in at the same time because I don't want to lose too much chroma. Keep bringing it up until I'm happy. The value is about right. And I'm starting to feel like a light and shadow change here. I'm starting to feel a light and shadow change here now. So there's very little painting happened so far. But I'm being quite obsessive about these colour blocks, about getting them right. And I think I'm already beginning to be rewarded with, if I just look at this area here, I can already start to see a suggestion of some light and shadow here. I can't just add white to lighten this because I'll drop the chroma too far and it will look wrong. I've gone a little bit too yellow, which is perhaps not the end of the world, and it needs to be a little bit more red, but I'm more bothered about the value and the chroma. Than I am about the hue. So, talking about edges as well, I'm happy with that now. talking about edges as well, here's a case in point where we've got an edge here. I've got a shadow shape against a light shape. Now that's a cast shadow, which means it's actually going to be a softened edge. I've got quite a bit of paint on there. Another thing that I think people often struggle with is just not using enough paint, you know. When you have enough paint on there, it's very easy to blend and soften edges. So this is a semi-synthetic, about a 1/2 inch flat. It's dry. So the object that casts this shadow is over on the left, which means the closer an edge is to an edge of a cast shadow is to the object that casts it, the harder it is, and the edge gets softer as it moves away. So just with a kind of, because I've got enough paint on here, just with a kind of a hatching and then a drag with a dry brush, soft dry brush, I can sort that edge out straight away, you know, for what I want it to be. Let's put the cast shadow in. Cast shadow shape goes into the vase. Comes out there, probably not quite that dark at this bit. Off the edge. There's a darker shadow at the back here that does show some division between the background and the cloth. And if I leave that edge there a little bit harder than this one, it will be enough for you for your brain to think that you can see that line continuing over here. It won't bother you that it's not there, you know, you will think that it's there. So this is cast shadow. I'm going to end up lightening this over where it's into the vase later. So the further away it gets from the object, the softer it gets. So bigger hatches before I drag give me a softer edge. This is a really useful way of getting edges sorted out right at the beginning. I'm going to soften this one at the back a bit, but not as much as the others. So, you know, we're already we've got something going on. There's already a vague suggestion of light and shadow there, you know. I think, you can tell me if you disagree, I think maybe the background, I've judged a lot of the values a little bit too dark, I think. So I'm not moving on unless I'm happy, you know, with what I've done so far. I'm not just going to throw down a load of stuff and then sort it out later. You know, I want it to be right before I move on. And I think the background can be a little bit lighter over here. There's a kind of a lighter sort of a strip. Which is going to be nice, you know, to have that in there, because it's going to show the light and the shadow more. And I would rather be reasonably happy with that before I move on. Some things I will ignore. So I'm going to use this soft brush again. Soften, just to blend all of that a little bit. Just taking the brush strokes out, basically, so it's not so... I don't take them out entirely. I like to keep some in. Yeah. Christy says, I missed the beginning. What colours are on your palette? Oh, good question, actually. I was going to say, but I didn't. What I've got here is lead white, which I've actually run out of, so I'm going to have to get some more of that out. So lead white, and I'm nearly out, look. Might have to change to titanium before I've done. I think I've got some more somewhere. Lead white, This here is cadmium yellow lemon. I'm going to show you in a minute what that's there for. Yellow ochre. The reason I've got yellow ochre is to use as an ingredient in the cloth colour, mostly, possibly in the flowers, but mostly in the cloth. Green gold, which I may use in the leaves, but more likely I'm going to use that in the shadow colour of the flowers. Quinacridone rose, just a blue-red, which is there to be an ingredient in the cloth colour to push those colours more red. Transparent red oxide, an ingredient for the cloth colour and also the background. Raw umber, because it's just the best colour in the world ever, and I never paint without it. And ivory black, to drop the value and drop chroma of some bits where I want to. So for instance, there's some ivory black in the background here to drop the chroma. There. Let's put some green in. Now, the nice thing about the green is it's very, very dark. So it allows us to put something in before we put the flower colours in that's really going to kind of set them off. Especially the shadow colour, because what people quite often do is have the shadow colours too light in the flowers. They think, well, the flowers are white, so, or they're cream or whatever. But the shadow colours, the deeper shadow is actually quite dark. And having something really dark against it, like the green, is going to make it easier to see the actual value of the shadow colours as they go down. So we won't be too mimsy about them and make them too light. So this is black. Oh, another colour I haven't put out yet I'm going to need. This is a phthalo green. The one I've got here is Winsor & Newton Windsor Green Yellow shade. Any phthalo green will do for this. So I'm going to get some black out. A bit more. And I'm going to start to bring up the value a little bit with this green yellow. And the reason I'm doing that is because ivory black is actually a blue. Okay. So if you look at a lot of sap green tube paints, they will tend to have ivory black in them, the pigment that people usually make ivory black from in them. But this, as I bring the value up a little bit, it's turning green, but the chroma is quite low, and it's also more of a yellow green than I want. So if I want it to go more towards a green, I can send it that way with a blue green, a bluish green, which the phthalo green is, and it's also very high chroma. So that's going to give me a bit of extra chroma down here, which I do want. So these roses, the leaves are actually quite a kind of a bluish green. So I'm going to put quite a bit of the phthalo in. And that gives you about the highest chroma you can get at a really low value. What value is that? I really want to be right down the bottom here. Yeah, I'm about the value. Got so much paint on here, it's hard to see now. I'm about a value 1.5, which is pretty good, really. Right down the bottom of the value scale. So I'm going to use, this is a synthetic flat. It's actually a Rosemary's Angled Eclipse. And I'm using this because I want quite hard edges on those leaves, and it's also just the shape of the brush is quite good for leaf shapes. So let's bring that against the background. Now, if the value is right here, this should stand out against the background, right? When I'm putting this down, the bit that I'm interested in is to be looking at where this color meets the background, and does it look darker than the background? I'm going to add some more black because I think it could go lower. Especially on this side because it's really shadowy over here. So I'm not doing any nuance, I'm not doing any detail or anything, but I do want the shapes to be pretty good. And go right up to this shadow shape here of this flower. It's looking like it's about in the right place to me. In the overall value range, or the notan, if you like, of the design. So what do you think? Are you starting to see a suggestion of light and shadow in here yet? I know everybody wants me to put the flowers in, but I'm putting in everything else first so that when I put those in, it's easier to judge them. It can be easier to judge those colours when they go in. Everything is being painted pretty much flat, with no nuance, apart from the edges. I am doing a little bit of work on the edges here and there. So this is where we come to the stems. Now, rather than painting all of these stems, which would be a right mess on, take forever, I'd probably get hung up on it and get it wrong, and things would start to fall apart. I'm going to get a slightly lighter green, which goes a little bit more yellow. Because I've got light and shadow, I'm going to go somewhere in between the two, and I'm just going to paint this in. If I squint right down, I can persuade myself that there's basically a dark triangle here. Which goes past, we're into the vase now, the top of the vase is there, there's the water level, goes past the water level. Because if you squint right down, you can still see that shape going down, right? Yes, there is some nuance within it, but I'm not bothered about that for now. I'm going to add that later. Probably not today. As I say, this is a slightly extreme way of doing it, because I want to show you how little you can get away with and still create a feeling of depth and light and shadow. And actually this stuff that I'm doing now, this is the important stuff. All of the rest of it that you think you really need, most of it you don't. Or you need, let's say you need a lot less of it than you would think. So if I want to show, like, turn these into stems here and be able to see through them, I'll paint some background on over this, to show that. But I just want to make sure that this is all about the right value as it goes down. There's a dark shape down here as well, which comes right down. As I say, yes, there is nuance in there, but I'm not going to paint it right now. We've got a little bit of green here. Got a little bit showing up here, and yes, there's nuance there as well, but I'm not bothered about it at the moment. When I say nuance, I mean there's light and shadow. There's a light colour for the green as well, which I'm not going to bother putting in for now. Highly simplified. Hello, Preeti, good to see you. I'm gonna fill in a bit more of the vase. I'm gonna get a slightly smaller brush to do it, but I'm gonna use the background colours, because basically that's what we can mostly see through the glass. So if you want to paint glass convincingly, I think it really helps you not to think about it too much in terms of this is a piece of glass, and think about it in terms of light and shadow shapes. So when I blocked this out yesterday, I was saying, yes, well, there's a dark shape here. This is the water level there, and there's a dark shape there. it's darker than the background. So all I want to do is just in really simplified terms, I want to put it in the right place, but I just want to make sure that it's darker than the background. That area of background there. A bit darker than that probably. So I'm squinting down and I'm looking at the relationship between the values of this area here and the background. On the other side though, it's slightly lighter. Probably about the same as the background over here. So obviously I want them to match up because that's the water level there. So I'm constructing the vase out of light and shadow shapes that I can see through it. And then there's a lower value, I would say, probably somewhere between the two. It's not quite as dark as this, not quite as light as that, but it is still the background color that we can see down here. Slightly lighter bit at the bottom there. A light shape. You know, so if you squint right down, that's already starting to look like a vase. And, you know, hopefully you can see, like, I've hardly painted anything at all. You know, if you can look at things this way and paint them this way, if you nail the shapes and the colors, mostly it's the values and the chromas too. If you can nail those, then you're going to be really, really close. And the base of the vase, you can see some of the background color here, which is reflected down into the glass. And you can also see through it. So you see some of the color of the cloth as well. So I can mix between them and get something which is going to be pretty accurate. It's basically a combination of those colors, but it's quite a subtle difference. It's not really obvious. It's only really just a couple of small details which are going to make that highlights, which will go on, not yet, which will go on later. I'm itching to do them because they're fun to do, and it's like suddenly you see whether what you painted is going to work or not. But I'm not. Well, I'm trying very hard just to stay completely with shape and not to put any detail in at all. And all I'm focused on is getting my colors right. If I can get this right at this stage, the painting is going to be easy. Well, easier. Just trying to make sure I'm getting the right values here in this vase. Need to go down a little bit here. It's more like a background shadow color we've got there. Goes a little bit darker here. And yes, there are stems that I'm going to want to put in, but I'll paint them into or over this. Just make sure that lines up or it's going to look really weird. just for fun actually. I shouldn't do it, but I can't resist it. I'm going to get, look, just a little bit of lead white, and just to show you, like just by putting a little highlight in there, that's the water level there. We'll begin to show that. If you squint down, it will begin to show that as the top of the water level. But as long as everything else is right, it will work. And then the top of the vase is actually here, you know. There's that little highlight there, you can just see. I can't resist having a bit of fun with things like that. Anyway, the interesting bit now is the flowers. How long have we been going? About an hour. Okay, so longer than an hour. It's probably going to be, I don't know actually, you don't know, I don't know how long it's going to be. Not that much longer. Another 15-20 minutes maybe to get the flowers in. Maybe a little bit longer. Half an hour at the most, I would think. So what I want is, for the flowers I really want 3 colours, because I've divided them into very simple shapes, into light and shadow, but there are really 2 distinct shadow colours. There's a lower value shadow colour, which is right over here, and a slightly higher value shadow colour, which is here. So I think, looking at it, obviously there's a bit of experience involved in these decisions. Looking at it, I would say probably I'm going to want 3. Obviously there's a lot more than that there, and there's a lot of nuance that I'll want to add later. But I think 3 will be enough for me to get it starting to happen. I'm going to sort out a bit of this, take out some of these brush strokes. Soften some of this because don't want any hard edges really at the moment. I can add them later. I'd rather everything is just slightly soft at this stage. Apart from that, I'm pretty sure that's going to want a hard edge, so I'm going to leave that fairly hard. Okay. So my light and shadow colours. I'm in 2 minds about the light colour. This is, this is like the top end of my value range. This is, in Munsell terms, this is a value 9. That one is slightly more yellow, and that one is slightly more green. And I think probably would want a bit of both. Michelle, your tool told me 10YR, which is pretty much very close to what I chose. This is 10YR, and this is, I think, 5GY, 7.5Y, so heading towards green. And I think it's probably because there are 2 different kinds of roses in there, one that's more cream and one that's more towards green. The middle shadow colour is going to be, this is a more yellow version and this is a more green version, somewhere between those 2. And the deeper shadow colour is going to be about there. So let's see how little we can get away with painting here. And then once we've treated the edges, see if we can get an impression of these flowers just in really, really simplified shapes. Wendy says, I'm enjoying this, thank you. You're very welcome. Let's go for the light first. Got quite a bit to paint, so I'm going to make sure I mix up enough. I'm going to put in a small amount. I really just want to give this a slight hint of colour. I don't want to go too far with this. Put in a small amount of yellow ochre and the slightest touch of quinacridone rose, which make it slightly orange. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be all right. Let's make a slightly greenish one as well, just in case I want that too. I'm going to put tiny bit of the cadmium yellow lemon in, and just a touch of the green gold. Send this, that's going to be too chromatic, so I'm going to put a tiny bit of black in with it as well. See what we get. Too green. So if I want that to go more orange, I'll just steal a bit of my orange one and mix them together. Nice. So I can go a little bit more green if I want to. I'm not 100% sure on what's going to be the best hue. But these are basically the same value. They're both like value 9. Shadow colour. Shadow colour 1, which is like kind of in the middle, you could say. No, not that. So that's raw umber, a bit of yellow ochre to send it slightly more yellow, give it a bit of chroma, and some green gold. Bring up the value with white. And let's see where we are. Probably not going to need a huge amount of this. Still way too dark. Oh, and that's too light. I've overshot now. But I still wouldn't just chuck that in and say when I can fix it later. I want to fix it on the palette before I go in there. A little too light. Bring back in some green gold, which will drop the value a bit. Raw umber. This is definitely going towards the green version now. I think that's probably going to be a bit too green. I'm going to send it a little bit more orange. I don't want to add too much chroma. This is yellow ochre and it's probably going to add a little bit too much chroma, so I'm going to mix a little bit of white and raw umber with it to drop the chroma a little bit. And I can send it a bit more orange. So I'm going somewhere between the two. I'm just thinking out loud about what the mix here. I'm undecided whether it wants to be more towards the orange or more towards the green. So I've actually gone for somewhere in between. That was like a haiku or something. Shadow color. This I'm also going to use raw umber, yellow ochre, and a little bit of green gold to send it a little bit more green, or it's going to be too orange. I'm not bringing any white into this because I don't want to lose chroma, so I'm bringing up the value with yellow ochre, which is actually, it's a kind of mid chroma, but it's quite chromatic. So yeah, all right. I need to go a little bit more green, so I'll bring a little bit of green gold back in, which will also drop the value a little. So I always lay out my paints. I like to think in terms of light and shadow, so I lay out my mixes on my palette like this, with light towards the top and shadow towards the bottom, and I lay them sort of from left to right in terms of the areas that I'm painting. So, you know, here I've got the background, there I've got the cloth, here I've got the green, which is mostly just shadow, and here I've got the flower. The flowers, light and shadow patterns for the flowers. And I haven't put out anything here that I don't need. You know, I mean, there's no blue in this, so I'm not going to put blues out. I know a lot of people paint with set palettes and are always looking to refine their set palette. And people say, oh, I can't paint without Indian yellow and stuff like this. But, you know, you totally can. You just need to know what colours you need and then put out just what you need to mix them. It's a much simpler approach. So I'm going to use I'm going to use two brushes here. Cornelissen again. Rosemary's again. I really like these for flowers. The reason I've got two is I'm going to have one light and one shadow. Let's try that shadow shape out. I'm going to put a little bit of, before I put these on, by the way, I'm just getting a little bit of oil on them and then wiping them off, which means that I'm not going on with dry brushes. I mean, this really wants to be, I think I'm going to need to bring up my background value there before I put this on. Otherwise, it's not really going to show properly. Because the background does get quite a bit lighter at this bit here, over this side. And if I put this shadow color down and it doesn't show because my background is the wrong value, I should put this through your tool, Michelle. What I should have done is sent you a copy of the photo so you could put it through the tool on the fly and tell me. We should do that one day. We should do a live painting session where I'm painting here and you can have and I can make guesses for the values of the areas of the painting, and you can put it through the tool and tell me how close I've come. That would be fun. That would be a fun session. I think that's probably more like it. And the reason is because I want this shadow when it goes down onto the surface of the panel. If you look at the reference photo, that shadow there of the roses is darker than the background behind it. It's a little darker. So when I put this down, that's the relationship I'm looking for. Yeah. Might be a little bit too dark, but we'll see. We'll put it in anyway. We'll adjust them on the fly. This is all shadow. Try to get the overall shape right. Oh dear. We've got a spammer on our YouTube. Just let me deal with this. Okay. Sorry about that. On the fly, spammers have somehow they can pick up when you're live on YouTube and post spam. If you're on Facebook, you won't have seen that. Thankfully. Just have to try and remove them quickly. So this part is fairly crucial, getting this relationship right. So I'm spending some time here to try and make sure that I get this one where I want it to be. I think it's a little bit on the dark side. So I'm going to bring the value up slightly. Not a huge amount, but just a little. Because it still needs to show against that background as a shadow shape. I don't want to do too much with it yet because I haven't got any of the rest in, so it's kind of hard to judge. deep shadow for the roses. And also, although there's quite a bit of nuance across this shadow shape here that shows the two roses, for now, I'm just going to paint this all as a single shape. And it's almost as dark as the green of the leaves and the stems, but not quite. So it's actually looking like it's about right. I've gone slightly higher value than I'd originally guessed because I'm judging the relationships as I go. And this is the reason for doing this, you know, is so that you can judge the relationships as you go along. I'm also feeling at the moment that the chroma might be slightly high. There is a definite light section there, so I'm not going to paint that bit in. And equally at the top here, there's a slight light section there on the edge, so I won't paint that in, but all the rest of it I'll put in. Not trying to paint flowers. Not interested in things at all, just a shadow shape that I'm trying to get about the right shape and about the right colour. And again, I must emphasize and reiterate that I'm doing this in quite an extreme way in order to try to override our usual mental process of our brain taking over and thinking that we have to do two roses here, because actually I've found in my experience in teaching, as soon as people start to, you can see it happening in the work, as soon as people start to think about things that way, they start to lose the form and they start to lose the values pretty quickly. And we don't want that to happen. There's a bit of this shadow, bit of this rose here is in shadow too, so I'm going to paint that in all as one shape, just as an extension of this shape, because it's all shadow, right? And then up here, this area is shadow too. That's our lighter shadow, and I think the chroma is a bit too high, so I'm going to drop the chroma a little bit as I go. Trying to paint just the shape. So this is almost all shadow shape with a small sliver of light in between those two flowers. No edge handling yet, just thinking about relationships. It's like a sort of taking out each individual element and trying to sort it out one at a time. You know, so yesterday we looked at dividing the light and shadow into shapes, and also drawing out what we hope is accurate shape, reasonably accurate shape. Today, we're just looking at the color relationships of those shapes. Tomorrow will basically be about starting to break the shapes down further into smaller parts. It's actually easier if you do it all with wet paint, but I'll be able to remix these colors because I know what I had. And if this, actually thinking about it, I'm not sure if it will be dry enough to work on tomorrow, but we'll see. Hopefully it will be. Might have to wait a couple of days till the next session. So I'm just kind of deciding that once something is goes up the value range enough, I'm saying it's light. And if it goes down the value range enough, I'm saying it's shadow. But there's no real hard and fast rule for this. As long as I don't get sucked into painting the flowers, as long as I can stay simple and just focus on the shapes, then I'll be all right. So that's already pretty close because, you know, I've got white here. All the white patches are already pretty close to what we would want. In terms of value. So even at this point, you can start to see. It's good to leave this here actually, because then you can see against the white panel what's still there. Margie says, I love the way you're willing to give yourself a colour challenge with a laugh and a fun spirit. My heart is racing, Margie. I mean, the thing is, this is enjoyable, this stuff. I think, you know, painting. You know, something like this I'm not really stressed about it because I'm not trying to make a wonderful painting at this stage. I'm just thinking about these shapes. Look, I'm going to soften this edge there because that's a shadow. So let's soften that a little bit. I think the chroma of the green might be a little bit too high there, but we'll see. So before I put any light shapes in, I want to put in this shadow here. And that is definitely more orange. I wonder... It has more chroma. It's I suppose you could say it's like a cleaner, kind of a cleaner color. I'm thinking probably 5YR. Or yellow. But it definitely has more chroma than anywhere else. Maybe 7.5. A little bit higher. Oops, just dropped my Munsell book. Let's say, I think if I put a colour something like this in mixed with the light, I think that will probably work there. Just this on its own will be too dark. Let's go a little bit lighter actually. Go a little bit lighter. Something like that probably. So I'm going to mix that up because I want to have that in before I put the light in. I want to put that, complete the kind of the shadow areas, if you like. I need to get some more clean white out. Bondine says, I'm getting stressed just watching you with the flowers. But it's just paint, right? So if it doesn't end up right, you know, I can change it. And at this stage, it's really easy to change. You know, anything can be changed at this point. I'm looking at my, overall, I'm pretty happy that I'm getting a feeling of light and shadow. This has definitely gone a little bit too yellow. And I think the chroma is a bit high. Maybe the chroma is a little bit high, but overall it's working okay in the painting. Bondine says, if you put your tray with mixed colours, put cling foil over it, you can put it in the freezer and it'll be ready for use tomorrow. Yeah, I'd be lucky if I could get anything in our freezer. We have a tiny freezer that we don't use much. I'd never do that, actually. I personally like to mix fresh paint. I much prefer working with fresh paint, personally. Maybe it's slightly superstitious or something, I don't know, but I would rather mix fresh paint every day. I do actually chuck away a fair amount of paint, but I would rather that than find myself with paint which is starting to set up on the palette and to be struggling a bit with it. A little bit too yellow, chrome a little bit too high. Drop the chrome a little bit. Whoa, way too red. That's what happens when you don't focus. I also have too much chroma in there now. This is going to sound like the most terrible excuse, but we're past 8 o'clock now, so this is UK time, so this is quite late for me. I've been painting all day already. And I find pretty quickly that my mixes take me longer when I get tired. I may even need to start this one again. Just put too much of the wrong thing in and then suddenly the mix has gone and you're in trouble. That's all right. Possibly lost a little bit too much chroma. Add a little back in. No, that'll do, I think. I'm also dropping things all over the place, which is a sure sign as well that I'm getting tired. Spent most of the afternoon today working on the cloth for the pear painting, which was required quite a lot of focus. Let's see how this looks when it goes down. Chroma is a bit high, I think. For the whole of that area. And it's probably a little bit too orange. But it's not a million miles out. Yeah, Ginia says I really like the color choice for the shadow. Yeah, yeah, I think it's pretty close. I'm looking at this relationship here mostly and that one there, and they look like they're working pretty well for me. If I squint right down, you know, you could try this actually if you're on anything really, phone or a tablet or laptop or something. Try taking the window of the stream and making it really, really small, because that's basically what you do when you stand back, you know, and that will show you the effect that I'm going for with these. Right, let's start putting some light in now. Going to be mostly hard edges on the light. So we're up around, this is like near the top end of the value scale, so we're like value 9, which leaves us just enough, just a little bit to be able to put like highlights on some areas, like highlight on the vase a little bit. This highlight will be worked into as well, but I can go right across. See, this I'm painting as a single shape, painting across those two flowers there. And it's a good idea, actually, if you're painting from a photo reference, is to get the photo up in some kind of a package, or even just, you know, open it up in a web page or anything, or, you know, and just make it really, really small. Because that's exactly the same thing that you're doing when you stand back to have a look at your work and decide if you're hitting it right or not. It's exactly the same. And squinting down is the same thing. You're trying to basically just simplify everything to stop you working with detail and to persuade you just to see patterns of light and shadow, just as we're doing here. So I can go, in hue terms, I can go a little bit more towards orange, a little bit more towards green, depending on which flower I'm looking at the time. But I'm trying very hard just to paint the shapes accurately of the light and the shadow. Not to get involved in, see, there's another light shape that I can put in about here. So I'm trying to see this just as a light shape, not thinking about it as a part of a rose. It's quite hard to do that. It's quite hard to make yourself do that. Have little light shapes around the top of this one here. Oh, that's annoying. I got green in my light shape. I want some of a lighter shadow here. That's going to be more of an edge handling thing when I get to that point. Light shape. These brushes are really, I mean, any synthetic flat will do for this. They're really nice for describing shape. I need to bring in a bit more background there. Let's get a fresh brush for that smaller one. So no detail means no modelling within these major shapes. So it's a poster study, if you like, but it's a poster study of, oh, I missed a shadow shape. Let's get that shadow shape in. It's a poster study of shapes, patterns of light and shadow, not of actual objects. Shadow shape. It should be slightly lighter than the background. There's a bit too much chrome and that's too light as well. Only very slightly lighter than the background there. So now I'm at the point where I can start to see the relationships happening and everything becomes a little bit easier. Let's bring this light shape round. Now there's half tone in there, but I'm not actually going to get involved in that at the moment. Because it's really tempting, it is incredibly tempting, but it would not be then as much of a demonstration of simple light and shadow shapes, which is what I want at this stage. All right, we're nearly there. I don't know if that came out on the mic, but my stomach is rumbling. Just realised it's like about probably 8:30 or something now and I haven't eaten since lunchtime. I've been stood here painting all this time. I'll show you the pear painting actually in a moment, because that one's, I think it might be finished. Did quite a lot on it today. Have we filled it all in? Yes, we filled it all in. I'm going to leave this white bit up here right until the end. But what I am going to do now is a little bit of edge handling. If I can find the brush I use for that. Just to, maybe better get a fresh one, just to soften some of these edges. So all of this is a soft edge here. So I'm going to soften that. This obviously is gradually turning, so that's a very soft edge there, so I'll soften that there. We want a soft edge around here, because this is a gradual curve with petals from light to shadow. I'm going to keep a slightly harder edge between those two though there. This goes softly off into shadow. That stays fairly hard. This is mostly pretty hard, but it goes off slightly there into softer shape. That's all hard, and this is all hard. I'm going to blend that a little bit, soften those edges there in the background. Straighten up some of this background a little bit. And that's it. That's as far as I want to go with this today. Apart from the bit that I've decided to leave at the top, we've covered everything. Even though there aren't even any stems and there's nothing to show the difference in the leaves. But I hope you'll agree that even though everything has been painted so incredibly simply, if you squint right down, this is a painting. It's well on its way. If there were anything that I really felt I needed to change, this would be the time to do it. Like I might do tomorrow. I don't know if I will be able to stream tomorrow because I suspect that a lot of this might be still too wet. But we'll see. All of the flowers, I think, will still be wet enough to work on a second day. So we'll see how we go. Hopefully we'll be able to. But the bit that I think I'm probably happiest with here is these lovely shadow colours here. I can knock back the chroma a little bit if I need to, but I'm really feeling shadow in there. So at this point you can see the composition. There's maybe a little bit of adjustment, lightening the background even further here, maybe, but that was just really to get it closer to the photo, which maybe isn't what I want. Maybe I like it like this. I do feel I need to bring up the value here still a little bit more, which can be done on the next stage quite simply. But I hope you can see now what I've been going on about when I talk about painting shapes of light and shadow and not things, and how this is already becoming, if you look at it, squint down, close one eye and squint down. That's how I look at things when I look at this. There's a strong feeling of light coming down. Even though, you feel those as flowers, even though there's been absolutely no detail at all. And there's no division between these two flowers here. And there's no division between these two flowers here. You don't need it in order to convince your mind that what you have there are patterns of light and shadow. What you need is reasonably accurate shape and good colour. This is most of what I wanted to demonstrate is already there. But I'm going to do more on it, and I'm going to stream it live because I want to show you. It would just be too annoying, right, to do this and then not show you where it goes after this. There's a couple of things. There's something I've just noticed that's annoying me. This shape here has become too dark, I think. So I'm going to lighten it a little bit. This is the sort of the standing back and judging part of the process and deciding what needs to happen, what needs to change. So I'm not thinking about, does it look like a flower yet? Have I got the lightness of the petals or all of that? Do you know what I mean? I'm not bothered about any of that. All that stuff takes care of itself if you nail all of this. All I'm thinking about is, do I need to change anything? Oh, I was saying I was going to show you very quickly what happens with the stems before I sign off. Let me just show you quickly, to turn this into stems, I would just take this colour here up into it. And it will start to create the impression almost instantly of stems there. The less you can paint, the better. Apart from anything else, because there's less chance of you making mistakes. But if you can force yourself to look at, it's not easy, but if you can force yourself to look at things in this way, this is how a painter sees. You need to see the world in patterns of light and shadow. If you want to paint well, if you want to paint a visual impression, a strong visual impression. Okay, I'm itching to work on these flowers some more. I'm not going to lie. Even though I'm tired and I want to eat, this is wrong, so I'm going to take it out. Even though I've frankly done enough painting today, I really, really want to keep going because I want to paint those flowers. And I know it's easier to do them at this stage when they're still wet. But I'm happy that already there's a feeling of light and shadow. And if anything, it's stronger now than it will be later because there's nothing to complicate it. There's no little details to make it go wrong. It's all just really, really, really simple. Right? Michelle, if you're still there, Let's have a bit of fun with this. I'll stick the photo into your tool again and I'll make some notes. I know which chips I used, obviously, for choosing the colours here that I've used. So we can compare notes with my unaided guesswork and see what your tool says. That would be really fun. Bondine says, I'm going to have a drink now, it's too much. Yeah, I could do with a glass of wine, I think. So this is basically, as I say, this is a very extreme version of it. But when I'm laying in a painting, when I'm doing a block in, I'm thinking in these terms, even though I might put a little bit more detail in. This is still the terms that I'm thinking in. I think actually my camera might be, didn't think of that. I think my camera might be a little underexposed. Let's try and bring it up a little bit. Because I want the highlights to to be close in value to what you see on the photo, you know. And maybe actually then the maybe the background and the cloth aren't too dark. Maybe they're about right. I don't know, hard to say. I think that's probably a bit better. But there you go. You know, I can already start to see the vase. I can feel the vase is there. But you saw how little I painted. You know, I haven't painted the vase at all. Just didn't do it. We will, a little bit, but you can hopefully see it's not going to take much more than that. Oh, Ginny says, can you show us again the painting of the flowers you just finished? Yeah, actually, if I can find it, I'll show you two of them that I showed yesterday that are further along. So this is a painting that was started in exactly this way, but it's just at stage 2, say. So this is where this one will go next. I think this one is actually a stronger composition, actually. That's where it goes next, like, as long as I don't add any mistakes. And this is one that's almost finished that was started in the same way. Very different subjects, all flowers, obviously, you know. But that's basically how it's done. Christine says, you wanted to show the pears. Oh, the pears, yeah. Let me show you this. I have to be a bit careful because it's wet. I think this might be finished. I mostly worked on the cloth and I did some more on the background today. I'm going to post some stuff on Facebook later on, actually, for Munsell nerds about what I did with the background. Can you see that? I don't know if you can. Hopefully you can see it. I'm getting in the way. So what I've mostly I've just done some little changes here and there, and I finished the cloth. I think I finished the cloth. I think it's finished. It's got a kind of a bit of an air of mystery and something about it that I really like. So I'm pleased with that one. I'm very pleased with that one. It felt like a lot of stuff that I've been thinking about for a while came together. Cindy says, was this from a recent workshop? I love it. The flowers you showed to Ginny. Oh, which one? The roses? The roses or that one, the roses? Or that one? Primroses. This is just a painting I did about 2 years ago. This is not a workshop. No, this was just a painting. But I did film it and I put a little video, like a time-lapse thing of that up. The roses, yeah. No, that isn't from a workshop, that one. But I'll be happy to share the reference photo that I did this from. And I've recorded the process. I would like to finish this, actually. I've recorded the process of that painting, so I can make a little video of it and I'll share the reference photo. Hopefully I will, if I can get around to it, you know. Romy says, I love the tip about bringing pick to a small size on the screen and squinting. Yeah, it really helps you nail stuff doing that. It really does. It's very useful. So for me, when I'm streaming live, I've got a monitor in the corner of the room that shows basically what you see, so I can check that the stream is going all right. And funnily enough, one of the really useful things for me about that is that I get to see the subject, the reference photo, and my paintings side by side on the same screen, quite small. So it's really, really useful, you know, from that point of view. Hopefully you're very welcome. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody's questions. Thank you so much for coming along today. How long did we go for? Oh, almost 2 hours, a lot longer than I thought. Never mind, I'm really happy. I'm in love with this painting already, so I'm probably going to bring it to a finish in any case. And you'll see maybe on YouTube or on Facebook the progress of this. But I'm loving it already. I think it's really nice at this stage, but I really want to go in there on the flowers, and I'm really looking forward to finishing the vase as well. So tomorrow, I think probably the roses will be paintable. I'm not sure about the rest of it, because this is going to have started to dry, but at least the lights of the roses will still be paintable on. So I may be back tomorrow. We'll have to see. I might need to leave it a couple of days and come back on Thursday. Nancy says, tell us where to find the process for the rose painting, please. Have I put it? The time-lapse video. I think it might be on YouTube. Give me just a second and I'll see if I can find it. I'm chucking so much stuff out there, I forget what I've done, you know, and where it is. Yes, I think I've got it. Oh, why does YouTube put ads on everything now? It's so frustrating. They changed their terms of use so that they could basically put ads on absolutely everything. Here you go. There is a link to, let me just stick it in Facebook chat as well, to the video on YouTube of the process of that other pinkish rose painting. Maybe we'll finish that one too, but I'm more into this one at the moment. Okay, time for me to sign off and go and eat my dinner and pat the cat and say hi to my wife and kids. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming along. Really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you all again tomorrow. If it works out tomorrow, I'll send out an email if I can paint on this again tomorrow, and we'll get a bit more detail into it. We'll see where we go next. Actually, I'm kind of liking the cloth, you know, even though it's slightly too dark and too high chroma. Maybe I'll leave it. It's got a sort of a romance to it. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.